Hi and welcome to this week's Wu Wei Wisdom Life Lessons teaching. It's great to be back with you all. Today we are talking all about the proud inner child. Now, does asking for or accepting help from other people make you feel not good enough, a failure, weak, stupid, or a burden in some way? If you are struggling with a real life problem, whether it's to do with your health, relationships, money, or career, do you still deeply and stubbornly resist the idea of reaching out or asking for help, or even you push away support that might be offered to you by friends, family, or loved ones? Well, if you can recognize this unhealthy habit in you or someone you know, this teaching will explain what drives this self-sabotaging behaviour and what you can do about it. Okay, David, so this idea of not wanting to ask for help or pushing help away, is this something that you recognise a lot with your clients?
Yes, and they normally come to me with this idea of isolating themselves, locking themselves down, pushing the world away. Being self-sufficient is very important, and then they have not very many friends around them, or they find it hard to keep a partner. And so this idea of shutting down is what I normally talk about with them.
So what's going on here? What's driving this shutting down, pushing people away, not wanting to accept help or support when they really need it?
Well, it's an interesting question because it kind of ties in with our other two teachings, particularly the emotional pendulum and the inner child teaching. So remember, for those of you just joining us, new members, new subscribers, when we talk about the inner child, we are not talking about something outside of you. We are talking about a part of your mind. You may prefer to call it your ego or your emotional mind. I prefer to call it the inner child because of the characteristic. And then we talked a few teachings ago about the pendulum. So part of your mind that's experienced emotional pain as a child has come up with a strategy of, if I keep myself distanced, if I keep other people away, if I do not perceive myself as being weak or vulnerable, or then I will not risk being emotionally hurt or upset. So it's a kind of a lesser of two evils kind of technique. And similarly, on the emotional pendulum, this could apply if you swing to the other side. This could apply to the person that swings too far the other way and then becomes too needy, too grasping, wanting, not being able to survive as on themselves. So they're swinging. But we're concentrating on this teaching on the person that really wants to isolate themselves because they do not want to risk being hurt. I often say it's like they don't want to put the head above the trench. They don't want to stick the head above because they don't want to be hit.
And so if we believe, for example, that if we accept help or ask for help, that somehow it makes us weak, a lesser of a person, or even a burden to people, how does that relate to the idea of, as you say, not wanting to be hurt? What's the connection there?
Well, that goes back to the original teaching, which really this video is all about. Please stick with me and please think about it. You are the creator of your emotions. You are not the victim of them. This is the most important teaching I can share with you to really meditate on and think about. Because when you were a child, and this is why the inner child metaphor really works, you didn't understand that. And you believe that negative emotional experiences came from the outside in, like you were being attacked. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, when you are being what we call in our model CCJ, you're being criticized, you're being compared, or people are being judgmental against you, this experience of this emotional feeling was so intense that when you were a child, you came up with the logical reason to deal with this was to protect yourself, to shut yourself away, to build a wall so you didn't experience the emotion. But if this is you, just think about it. Has that ever protected you against that emotion? Do you suddenly stop feeling it? And this is why the teaching that I gave a few moments ago is so important. Because if it worked, if shutting yourself down did protect you from emotions, why are you still experiencing them? And that's why that teaching is so profound. I call it the flip. You have to think about it a different way. Don't put the cart in front of the horse. And if you are keeping yourself isolated, if you don't want to reach out for support and for love and for help, it's because you don't want to risk being hurt. This is where it gets very confusing.
Okay, so to just dissect that, we have an experience in childhood that we experience strong, uncomfortable, painful emotions that, of course, we don't want. We believe that those emotions are attacking us. We're not creating them. Therefore, we then create, as you say, a wall of protection. And that is, I'm going to shut myself off. I'm going to not ask for help. I'm not going to accept help. And also, I guess, I'm going to work to try and be perfect and be good enough and to be able to cope with everything. Therefore, I won't need and want help from other people. So this wall of protection then becomes a strategy for the child, and then for us as the adult, our inner child, to, in theory, protect us from the emotions.
Yeah, no, if you dig down a little bit deeper on that, Alex, you see, this normally happens in childhood. As I say, if you listen back to some of our teachings, particularly between the ages of 6 and 9, not exactly, but around that age, and it normally comes from when you're expecting your expectations of love, support, from, say, a parent or a guardian, and that doesn't come in the way that you would want it to come. And then they may even be very critical of you or very comparing of you to your siblings or to other people or to your neighbors or to somebody else, or they can be very judgmental. And that creates a real intense pain. Please never underestimate this pain. This emotional pain is life-changing. It puts you onto a different track. Remember in the other teachings we talked about 2 tracks? This emotional pain is so intense, overwhelming, like a tsunami of pain. And so the child, as Alice just said, comes up with an idea. Well, if I make sure that I don't need that support ever again, I'll never put myself in that position again. I'll never leave myself open. I'll never put my head above the parapet in case it gets shot. That pain was so intense, I never want to put myself in that position. And that is the worst case scenario that almost comes kind of emblazoned on your belief system. It's all about when you get stamped, when you do the cattle, what's that? Branded, that's the word I was looking for. It's almost like that's a branded, that becomes your story. That story is so powerful for you. Then you construct your worldview around that branding. I do not want to be branded again. So I'm never going to go back into that position again. And then, as Alex said, the rest of your life is being guided by that belief, by that filter. So everything goes through that filter. And this is why you do not want to leave yourself open to be abused, to be upset, to be overwhelmed, to be let down. See, all of these things that my client tells me, they let me down so badly, David. This is happening to me all through my life. Why does it keep on happening? It's because you haven't learned the lesson. This is why we call these life lessons. If you don't learn the lesson, it will return. It comes around like on the carousel at the airport.
But isn't in that kind of repeating of the lesson, it's also part of the self-fulfilling prophecy, because as you say, if our inner child from a young age sets up the idea, I don't want to experience that sort of emotional pain again, because when my mummy or daddy or my grandpa or grandma or my teacher criticized me or embarrassed me or laughed at me. It can be something really, really subtle that the adult does not appreciate the profound and deep and lasting impact it has on the child. But so that child then takes that, says, I don't want to experience that again. Then it sets up this, as you say, the wall of protection. And it sets up this mechanism where it's always on the lookout to want to try and avoid the possibility of experiencing that red light emotion again. So with that radar in place, then it's when we got the self-fulfilling prophecy, because at all costs, it will shut down at the slightest possibility of a problem or the slightest possibility of even maybe someone reaching out to help them. It believes, oh no, this means I'm not good enough. Oh, this means I'm weak. Oh, this means I'm a failure. Therefore, I'm going to push this attention. I'm going to push this support away. And so it becomes more and more entrenched, would you say?
I would say exactly that. You mentioned a word there that I didn't mention, which is what happened with a client just a month ago, this embarrassment. So we were going down this path, the golden thread, trying to understand why he found it difficult, that he found it quite easy to find partners but when he got really kind of committed, he would immediately pull away. And he couldn't understand that this was a middle-aged man in his 40s, and he couldn't maintain a regular long-term partnership. He would have plenty of friends, plenty of girlfriends, but nobody committed. And one of the girlfriends says, you're a commitment phobe. And he said, well, I'm not. I want a relationship. And when we did the work and we found it down, what it went down to is the word that you said. That's why it reminded me, embarrassment. I do not want to be embarrassed, David. I do not want to open myself up to this partner and then for them to walk away and leave me, or to pick on my faults and to show me up and to say, the image you gave me, the mask you gave me, now I know you a little bit deeper, and I do not want to take that risk. And when we did the work, it went right back to his father, who used to do that. He compared him, so CCJ, criticizing, comparing, being judgmental. He compared him to his brother, who was an athlete. He wasn't an athlete, he was more artistic. His father didn't rate his artisticness at all. He rated his brother athleticism, and he kept on comparing him to his brother, and he embarrassed him. So therefore, what he did, he protected his artisticness, never showed his artisticness, tried to get onto the football team, did get onto the football team, but he was always fighting to get this praise from his father. Fast forward 40 years, and then you see now he doesn't want to let go of his inner sanctum, he called it, which is a great term. I do not want anyone to see my inner sanctum, because if they see me with my guard down, if they see me who I really am, they're going to judge me. They're going to negatively judge me. And no, I don't want the emotional pain. And so when we split it down, this is exactly what he was doing. He was trying to protect the emotional pain because he didn't accept. He accepted it absolutely maturely. That of course I create my emotional pain. There's nobody else can inject pain into my body. But the part of the mind that we call the inner child did not accept that. And he was still thinking that the emotional pain was something that comes in, like rains in, like an arrow going right into them, and they have to protect themselves.
So what we're talking about here is he basically didn't want to be emotionally exposed in his kind of model. His inner child thought that if I open up in a relationship, if I expose myself, for all that I am, good, bad, and indifferent, all my qualities, I then open myself up to being judged, potentially being criticized, potentially being compared, potentially like I was as a child. And so it's the same thing going on with the not wanting to ask for help, not accepting help from other people. I want to be seen as strong, capable, and, can conquer the world.
Yeah. And one word that you said when you was explaining him, you got it right, is I do not want to be rejected. So we had lots of issues there about rejection, about love, about all of the things that we're talking about now. So those are not his mature mind, but they are his inner child. And as I said, emotionally, and this is why this teaching is so important, is emotionally you're not being driven by your mature mind. You're being driven by a 6, 7, 8-year-old child who has a view on the world like a story, and this story becomes your identity. And this is what he became to understand. We worked together for 3 or 4 sessions. He became to understand that his inner child story had become his identity. He saw himself as somebody. He actually believed his father. This was the surprising thing to him. He actually said, and I said to him, well, are you saying your father is true, is right, that if you're not athletic, then somehow you're lesser than? And he says, you know what, David? I do. I do believe that you have to be athletic. And if I didn't show myself, if a girlfriend sees that I haven't got the body, or or I'm not always strong, or I'm not always determined, then they won't love me. And so you see how that childhood relays. It's slightly different, but the principle is exactly the same. This is why these teachings are so important for you to sit down and think about. When we press these buttons and they're a little bit uncomfortable, this is your inner child not liking what we're saying. Sit down and listen. So what do I agree with? What do I disagree with? Why do I disagree with it? And this is why I'm always saying on these teachings, it's so important. What do you believe? Why do you believe it? And in that case of that client, he believes that he has to be physically strong, emotionally strong, mentally strong in every case, else someone is going to reject him. So therefore, he can't go into a deep, meaningful relationship, because what's driving him is his fear of rejection.
Yeah. And so not only, I guess, is that stifling his ability to enjoy a fulfilling, lasting relationship and have that wonderful experience, but my goodness, what hard work that story sets up for him, that he has always got to be 100% perfect physically, emotionally, capably in everything. I mean, that's like, it's an impossible task his inner child is setting up for him.
Well, and we talked on the teaching about the emotional pendulum and the teaching about the inner child, how the inner child creates confusion and how you swing from one side to the other. So his story, his inner child story, it was really debilitating for him, because his artistic side, he said, I've never developed my artistic side. I'd love to be a writer. I'd love to sit down and write my story, but I would be absolutely reject doing that because somebody may not like it. And I can't stand criticism. I do not want criticism so this is his inner child talking, you see. I do not want to experience any form of criticism. And so therefore I have to put this image, this mask, this outside world, that I am strong, I am capable, I'm not worried, nobody really upsets me, I don't care. But here's the problem. Then he wants a relationship. That's why he came to me. That was his opening question. Can you help me understand why I can't hold a relationship? Why my last partner, who I was with for about a year, said I'm a commitment phobe, when the mature part of his mind wants a relationship. But the inner child, the inner child saying, no, 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 I do not want to risk. And so he's in this dilemma of what, if he goes into a relationship that he wants, he risks being hurt. And this is what the inner child didn't understand. He believed that the partner would hurt him, when the partner cannot create emotional pain. You are the creator of your emotional pain. And that's the teaching that breaks this story. Now, the inner child will want to hold on to the story like grim death. And as you're listening to me, if you get resistance, this is your inner child holding on to her story, because the inner child has made the big mistake that seeing their story as their identity of who they are, it cannot be challenged.
Yeah.
This is one of the biggest issues that I have with my clients when I start to challenge their inner story. They don't like it. Their inner child pushes back immediately, pushes back really hard, and uses emotions and to challenge the inner story, because if it is true, then of course it should hold up to scrutiny. There's nothing wrong. You can believe anything you want to, but do you believe what you actually believe, or is it inherited beliefs? Have, like my client, has he just taken on his father's beliefs and then owned them as his?
And so I guess ironically, it's the story, it's the misaligned, untruthful, unbalanced beliefs that I've got to be strong, I've got to be perfect, I've got to be right all the time, I've got to be capable all the time. It's that story that creates the red light emotion,
Yes.
not the girlfriend, not the partner, not the boss criticizing you, not something going wrong in your life. It's the story that, as you say, the inner child, so rigidly, so stubbornly, is so proud of, and that's why we say it's the proud inner child. That ironically, paradoxically, as usual, is what is creating the red light emotion. But we don't see that. We're blind to it. We just follow the inner child. We make the choice, as you say, between the adult self, the mature self, the authentic part of our mind that wants the deep and lasting relationship, that wants to step out and take the new career, that wants to sort out the problem, but knows it needs input from other people. We reject that logical, authentic way path because we do the default. We go to the inner child, to the inner child story, because I guess we're making the choice that that's more important, more truthful.
Well, I call it the lesser of two evils. So the child will always take the lesser of two evils because it sees it as familiar. So a lot of my clients will say, well, it's easier to do this. It's easier to keep myself isolated, David. It's easier not to be too committed. It's easier not to ask for help. It's easier just to manage on my own, to be a martyr. It's easier. It's not easier. It's just familiar. And the inner child has sold you the story as your identity, that if you do ask for help, then this is going to end in disaster. This is going to end in rejection. This is going to end in embarrassment. This is what this gentleman, he didn't like the idea that a committed partner where he opens himself up says to him, is this all you've got? Is this it? Is this what I'm getting? Is this all of, because he's been so busy on setting up this image, this story of he's highly successful, he's fit, he's active, he goes for a run every day, he goes to the gym, he's got a big house, he's got a successful company. And so all of that was the basis of the truth. But what the inner child had done is hyped it all up to be bigger than what it was. And he doesn't want to see a potential partner to see the whole of the story. They want to see the mask, the presenting forward. And so he doesn't want anybody to get past that mask, because then they'll say, well, actually, last year you made a bit of a loss, or actually the projections don't look too good for going forward, or the house mortgage is more than you told me it was. So they set up this thing, and he doesn't want anybody to see the real thing.
And that's the inner child doesn't want to be exposed. It doesn't want to be caught out, because it believes, it's almost like we then go right back to childhood, to that time with that individual when we were criticized, when we were laughed at, when we were compared, when we were judged. It's almost like we may be 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years old. But in that moment, when we get that, almost that tingling of red light emotion gets triggered off because of that story, we become that child we once were.
Absolutely.
Decades ago. It's like nothing's changed.
You said something really important there, because some of my clients are in their 70s and 80s, and we're still doing exactly the same thing. But this can change. This can change today, because this is why this teaching is so important. And this is why you have to consider the life lesson, because it's only in your mind. Your story is not your identity. You're far faster than that. You are amazing. You are awesome. I say it on every teaching. And yes, you may have upped yourself a little bit, but it's about time you come down to that wu wei, to that balance, to that harmony. You're not perfect. No one walking in two shoes is perfect. We all learn by making mistakes. And then the inner child will want to hold on like grim death to that perfection. I want people to be in awe of me, David. I want people to be amazed. I want people to say, oh my goodness, this is what the client was saying to me. Look what he's built, and he's built it just by himself. He didn't need any help. He said, I don't want to suddenly say, I do want help, because it would look like I'm weak, I'm vulnerable. I'm leaving myself open to be criticized, and I do not want to be judged. I do not want to be criticized. I do not want to be compared, because and that's what my father did. And I do not want to experience that again. Isn't that amazing that is so powerful? And this is why the golden thread technique is so important, because it opens up and you see that the story, the identity is built on a conclusion made when you were a child. And that is overpowering you. That is your, as Alex says, your default mechanism that you go back to. But it is a choice. It is a choice. You are choosing. You can choose something else. And these teachings are based on you cannot change what you don't understand. So first job is to understand it. Then you can carry on doing it. Nobody can stop you. No one can stop you. I certainly wouldn't even try and stop you. But it is your story and your choices.
But David, what if someone says to you, okay, I can understand that client's story, and that was about his ego, not wanting to be seen weak, not wanting to be seen to be imperfect, not wanting to be seen incapable in front of his partner. However, when I get red light emotions, uncomfortable, anxiety, angry, just a grating sense that I just do not want to accept help of other people, my family. It's not because of my ego or my inner child or my mind. It's because I don't want to be a burden to them. I'm thinking of them. I'm not thinking of me. I push and support and help away, not because of me, because I don't want to be a burden. You mentioned the word martyrdom. Now, what's going on here? Is it the same thing?
It's the same thing, and it's the other end of the pendulum. So we've been talking, the story today is about the one end of the pendulum, but thinking that you're a burden. Where did that come from? Do the golden thread again, if this is you. Think about, all right, where did this idea come from that if you ask for help or share help or work together or form a team, that somehow is burdensome? I would say if you do the golden thread, that will absolutely go back to your childhood. In my experience, it's parents saying, if it wasn't for you, have your parents ever said that to you? If it wasn't for you, you keep us down. And so what they do, they shift their emotional unbalancedness on harmony onto the child. If it wasn't for you, we'd be a lot happier. If it wasn't for you, we'd be a lot richer. If it wasn't for you. And so what the parent is doing is putting the emphasis on the child.
Yeah.
Now, I absolutely can understand, and I work all the time with clients who have this idea that the parents have difficulty in their emotional balance and their harmony. And so what they do is they blame the child. You make me mad. You make me upset. You are a drain on me. You are. And so what they're doing is putting all of the emphasis onto the child. And then the child comes up with their story. Oh, it must be me. There's something wrong with me. And so I do not want to reach out. I do not want to ask for help, because they've got a story that everybody is at the end of their tether. I always love this term. I've never found a tether yet, but they're at the end of their tether. Everybody must be like me internally, so I don't want to ask for help because I'm going to push them over the limit and then I'll be to blame. You see, so it's the same pendulum.
And would you say that often as a child, even if we're, say, not directly told, you're to blame for this, if this is your fault, sometimes the child can misinterpret situations. So as a child, if we see our mummy or daddy upset, or one of the parents leaves the home because of a relationship breakup, even though they may not be explicitly blamed, the child may not be blamed, we may blame ourselves anyway. And so the same story operates. I guess the story, as you said, is if I just keep a low profile, if I don't ask for help, if I don't become a burden, then everything's going to be okay. Everything will be fine. I'll keep the peace. I won't be a problem. And this is the inner child story again.
Well, this is actually a great explanation of the inner child, because one of the characteristics when we do the inner child teachings, and if you look back at the teachings, we've done many, many teachings on this, is the inner child sees things, yes, no, good, bad, right, wrong, just, unjust. So as Alex says, your example is a great example. If the marriage is split up and the husband leaves or the mother leaves or the family falls apart, even though nobody sits down and says to the child, this is your fault the family is splitting up, the inner child believes that they have something part of it. Because normally what I experience is that one of the parents will share things with a child that is far above their pay grade. They don't understand, totally inappropriate, because the parent is going through an emotional turmoil, and then they say, oh, your mother's like this, or your father's like this, or if it wasn't like you, or you're just, one of my clients I'm working with now was told, you're just like your mother. You're just the same as your mother. And if you tell a 6, 7, 8-year-old they're just the same as their mother, guess what they believe? That becomes their story. So they look at the mother and they go, oh my goodness, I'm just like her. And then they construct their story, their life journey, their lens that they view the world through that teaching. And that's what the golden thread's about. You go back. Why? Why do you believe that? Why do you believe other people are at the end of the tether? Why do you believe that? Why do you believe you have to keep a low profile? And that why gets you down to the inherited core belief, the fundamental, what the Taoists call the fountainhead. You're going right to the core, and then you're examining the core. No one can take that away from you. That's your belief. But in that teaching lies the power. Because if it's your belief, only you can change it. Because you were the one that put it in. Somebody said that to you, but you believed it. And this is where I get to with my clients. When you go through all the confusion, all the heartache, all the crying, all the pushing back, all the anger and the anger, all that stuff we deal with, all that what I call the froth. You have to get through the froth to get down to the core belief. And that fountainhead then gives you the power. And this is why Wu Wei teaching is so important. I want to give you the power in your life. Do not give other people the power of your life. You are awesome. You are amazing. You are divine. Now believe in yourself and make your decisions. You are not perfect. And this is where the power lies for you. The power to live your life authentically, to walk your path, to walk on fresh snow, to walk and do the things that you do and learn when you make a mistake. I believe in you. I believe in you. I'm only asking you to believe in yourself.
And I think that point you made, David, about giving your power away, ironically, most people would say, well, if I'm not asking for help, if I'm rejecting help, surely I'm not giving my power away. But actually what you're doing is you're running a story for your life based on giving your power to someone from your childhood, whether it was that whoever it was who criticized you, whoever it was on that situation you misunderstood, you're constantly from that point onwards been giving your power away to that situation, that person. You're not you're not living your truth.
Do you know, Alex, that's when we've done the golden thread and we've gone through the froth and we get down to it, and it's normally like a parent. Let's just run a scenario. Let's use that client. My father said this. My father said this. And then I said to him, so you believe everything your father said to you? And he smiled. He said, you're joking. My father's crazy. This was his words. My father's crazy. I don't believe that. Hardly anything he says. I said, well, why do you believe this? And it was like, you see his face change. Why have you cherry-picked and believed? You've rejected all of the other things your father said. As being stupid, you said, being silly, doesn't know what he's talking about. Yet, you still hold on to this. And the answer for this is because of the emotion.
Yeah.
That's why he's holding on to it. He's created the emotion, and then he doesn't want to go there. And he's put it in a box.
Yeah.
And he's put it away. He said, don't go there. That's like dynamite. That's like atomic reaction. That's the Geiger counter. When you go close to there, David, the Geiger counter goes off. No, I don't want to go there. But when you open the box, you see it's just a belief. It's your belief. And your father may well have believed it. And I call it, so what? So what if your father believes that he values athleticism over creativity? So what? He's entitled to his belief. The question is, why do you believe it?
Yeah. And so this then comes down to, as you say, taking the parent off the pedestal, or certainly for that momentous point that created the strong, overwhelming emotions. But also, we need to dismantle the idea of us being on a pedestal, us needing to be perfect. Absolutely. Would you say that's the life lesson here, that we need to teach the inner child that it can't be perfect, that asking for help, asking for support, needing to learn and grow is not a weakness. It's a strength, actually, to be able to reach out.
Well, I think this is a good teaching, because I think there's many life lessons here. I want to introduce you to a teaching that I use a lot with my clients, is appropriateness. Because sometimes it's not appropriate to ask for help. And sometimes it's absolutely appropriate not to let other people into that inner sanctum, as my client said. But to make those appropriate decisions, you have to be in wu wei. You have to be balanced. You can't have the inner child in control, because by that, you are just filtering through that story. And so therefore, it's almost impossible for you to make good, honest, balanced, appropriate decisions. And that's really what I'm looking for. That's the idea of wu wei, is you are making the decision based on all of your history, based on everything that's happened to you. So you have to choose whether you allow, I'm talking about my client now, whether you get closer to that person and commit because you value the person, not because what happened to you 40 odd years ago. That's inappropriate, because that lady is not your father. So you've got to make that appropriateness. And to get that appropriate life lesson, we've got to clear and deconstruct the old story, because that is not your identity. That is a chapter in your book. It's a very important chapter, very important. We are not dismissing it. We are not saying it didn't happen. We are saying, but that is just a chapter. You have moved on, and we learn from that chapter. That's why it's called a life lesson. What is it that you have to learn? And as Alex says, please respect and love your parents, but your parents are not perfect, and everything your parents said to you is not the truth. You have to gather yourself together and make your own belief system that is going to serve you well and appropriately in your life.
And I can put some links for you to other teachings we've done on inner child work. And obviously there is inner child work to be done here. But absolutely, if we go too far the other way, then we become needy, we become codependent. And so it's about finding that wu-wei balance. So the first step is to do the inner child work, do the golden thread process work, to find the original point of the vow when you made the decision to put up this wall of protection, to get on this perfection trap, and then dismantle it, doing the inner child reparenting.
And that would be the life lesson. So it goes back to what I say on all of the teachings. What do you believe? Why do you believe it? And that's really key. And get that clear in your mind. This is what I believe. This is why I believe it. And then challenge the reasons why you believe it for yourself, not for anyone else. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks as long as you think it.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. And we've also done a teaching on why you push love away. So that goes into a little bit more detail in terms of rejecting love and affection and relationships and what's going on with the inner child there. If you have enjoyed this teaching or have a comment or question, please do let us know, post it below. If you're interested in working one-to-one with David works with clients all over the world by Zoom video call every week, and I'll put more information on David's sessions below for you as well. And please, finally, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We produce new teachings every week, and we'd love to share your journey with you. We'll see you very soon. Bye-bye.